Shalom and welcome to Parasha Espresso, the weekly fix for spiritual lessons taken from the Parasha. Grab your coffee and let's take a look at the weekly Torah reading.
This week we'll be looking at Parashat 𝐕𝐚𝐲𝐞𝐿, which runs from Deuteronomy chapter 31 verse 1 to verse 30. Enjoy it, and don't forget to give us your feedback on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or via our website.
𝐏𝐚𝐫𝐸𝐻𝐿 was faced with an almost impossible task. He was born unexpectedly without both arms and legs and has had to navigate his way through life with this severe handicap. But as he recounts on his website, lifewithoutlimbs.org, he was able to get past the loneliness and depression of youth and now spends his life traveling around the world motivating people not to give up. He is an author, musician, and he loves to paint and swim. 𝐏𝐚𝐫𝐸𝐻𝐿 is living proof that no matter what your situation, you shouldn't give up. No matter how overwhelmed you are, there is always a way. Someone else who once found himself completely overwhelmed is Joshua. Joshua lived as Moses' assistant, studied under him, observed everything he did, and even ended up on Mount Sinai with him. But now, in this week's parasha, there's a twist to the plot. Joshua is going to succeed Moses. As God told Moses before, he will die outside the land of promise because of his disobedience. But we now learn that Joshua will lead the people over. At this stage of the narrative, we don't know a whole lot about Joshua. But later on, from the book which bears his name, we learn that he was frightened at the prospect of leading a whole people, let alone conquering new territory. If I were Joshua, I would have felt the same. Completely overwhelmed. But there is a positive for Joshua and for the rest of the people. We learn this week that God himself has appointed Joshua, not Moses. And God has a habit of choosing people with severe deficiencies to do things for him. So far in our journey through the Torah, he's used a lying Abraham, a deceptive Jacob, and a stuttering Moses. So while Joshua may lack leadership experience, God decides he's the right man for the job. Have you ever felt completely overwhelmed? Have you ever been given a task to do at work where you think that you'll never get it done? Have you been faced with the impossible, or at least the highly improbable? No matter who we are or where we live, we've all been in situations which haven't been easy. Especially in our highly strung Western society that we live in, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. Countless articles and books have been written on how to deal with feeling overwhelmed and the depression and burnout that can follow it. And yet more and more people are being presented with situations in life that are just too much for them to handle. So, how do we deal with life when it just all seems too much? Well, it's easy to start using buzzwords like balance or meditation or suggesting apps or books that can help. Let's see how both 𝐏𝐚𝐫𝐻𝐿 and Joshua dealt with being overwhelmed. These two men lived millennia apart and had different challenges to overcome, but the method they used was the same. Both in the Torah and later in his book, we learn that Joshua constantly turned to God when he was presented with something that he couldn't deal with. Over and over again, we read of him praying and even falling on his face before God in order to work out what to do. 𝐏𝐚𝐫𝐻𝐿 did the same. After constantly battling depression and feelings of inferiority, he gave his life to God at the age of 15. Both 𝐏𝐚𝐫𝐻𝐿 and Joshua realized that they, in and of themselves, could do nothing. If they were going to deal with the overwhelming task set before them, they would have to trust God. Nothing else would do. Personally, I often find that feeling overwhelmed comes with a sense of shame. After all, we want to be able to deal with the situations that we find ourselves in. We also look at others, which, while it can be inspiring, can also lead us to think, if they can cope, what's wrong with me? We fail to realize that we are all unique, each with different thresholds of what we can deal with. And even with people who are incredibly inspiring and refuse to give up, eventually they come to the end of themselves. Authors who beat the odds to get their books published eventually write their last successful book. Musicians who record albums eventually fail to go double platinum. No matter who you are or what you do, if you are only doing it in your own strength, you will ultimately fail. We see this in the life of Joshua, and I'm sure we would also see it in the life of 𝐏𝐚𝐫𝐻𝐿. There is at least once in the book of Joshua where he fails to rely on God and instead relies on his own strength. He makes a bad decision and doesn't ask God. There's even a time where he fails to conquer a city. But if you and I put our trust in God through the Messiah Yeshua, as Nick Vujicic did as a teenager with no arms and no legs, God guarantees that we will succeed at what He's called for us to do, because He is with us. No self-help book, no breathing exercises, no self-discipline will see you live a fulfilled life without being overwhelmed. Sure, certain methods work for a while, of course, but because they're grounded in us being able to cope, eventually they don't work. We human beings are just too fragile. We're too morally corrupt and unable to always have everything under control. God, on the other hand, permanently has everything under control. Not just Himself, but the whole universe. Come to think of it, it's crazy that we would think that we could do things on our own without the help of our Creator. I guess that's the ultimate expression of human pride. If you're feeling overwhelmed today as you listen, or even if you're not, I encourage you to come to God through the Messiah Yeshua. He knows you and your problems. He's the one who made you. Give all of the worries and everything that overwhelms you to Him, because He truly cares for you. The Messiah Yeshua has made it possible for us to enter into a living relationship with the God who longs for you to experience life to the fullest. Let His peace fill your heart and let His strength fill your life so that you can live for Him. Don't let your pride hold you back.
That's it for this episode. We hope you enjoyed our parasha Espresso. Please don't forget to subscribe to make sure you get the latest episodes. We'd love to hear from you, so please get in touch with us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or via our website at 𝐕𝐚𝐲𝐞𝐿.de.